Okay, let's just forget everything you've seen in the movies about hackers, right? Today, we're going to lay out a real-world roadmap for getting into cybersecurity, one step at a time. So if you've ever been even a little bit curious about this whole world, this is for you. This is your starting point, and it's all based on what experts say you actually need to know. So let's dive in.
So let's start with the big question. What does it really take to become a hacker? Well, the source material we're looking at is super clear on this. It is not about wearing a hoodie and typing crazy fast in a dark room. No way. It's actually a journey, one that's all about deep curiosity, a whole lot of patience, and a really methodical way of learning. And that's what this is all about. We're giving you the map for that exact journey.
So here's the path we're going to take together. First, we'll get into the hacker's mindset. Then, we'll build up your technical foundation. After that, we'll assemble your first digital toolkit, find you a safe place to practice, help you choose your quest or career path, and finally, we'll talk about why this field is a never-ending hunt.
All right, first stop, the hacker's mindset. And this is so important because honestly, the most critical tools you will ever have, they're not software. They're the principles that guide how you think.
You know, the source material we're drawing from boils this whole mindset down to just 3 words. Curiosity. You have to constantly be asking, how does this thing actually work? Then research. That's the drive to go out and find the answers to those questions. And finally, patience. Because let's be real, breakthroughs do not happen in 5 minutes. This right here, this is your mantra.
So how do you actually fuel that curiosity? Well, it's with this right here, advanced searching. And I'm not kidding. The source calls this the single most important skill, period. And we're not just talking about typing a question into Google. No, it's about knowing how to frame the perfect question to solve literally any problem you run into, any error code, any challenge, any weird system you're trying to figure out.
Okay, so once you've got that mindset locked in, we can move on to part 2, building your foundation. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts and lay down the technical groundwork. Think of it like the 3 pillars that are going to support everything else you learn.
So what are these pillars? First, operating systems, because you've got to understand the battleground, right? The environment you're in. Second, computer networks, so you know how machines are actually talking to each other. And third, the basics of programming, so you can understand the logic that makes software work.
Okay, this leads to a question that beginners ask all the time. Should I use Windows or Linux? And look, the source material is super passionate about this. It says, do not get sucked into this debate. It's a waste of time. The OS does not make the hacker. A real pro needs to get comfortable with Windows, because that's what the corporate world runs on, and with Linux, because it's basically the backbone of the internet and all the security tools. The real goal is being good at both.
So you might be thinking, okay, but how do I learn all this stuff without completely wrecking my own computer? The answer is virtual machines, or VMs. Just think of a VM as a computer inside your computer. It's a totally safe, isolated little sandbox where you can install whatever you want, test out tools, break things, all without any risk to your main machine. Seriously, this is non-negotiable. You need this to build your own lab.
All right, next up is networking. Now, you don't have to become a full-blown network engineer, but you absolutely have to understand how data gets from point A to point B. I like to think of it like the postal service. You need to get what IP addresses are, that's the street address. You need to understand protocols like TCP/IP, those are the rules for how you send the mail. And you need to know about things like firewalls. They're like the security guards. It's pretty much the language of the internet.
And that brings us to another one of those classic questions every beginner asks. Do I really need to learn how to code to do this stuff?
Well, the answer is a little complicated. The source says technically, no. But then it asks a better question. Do you want to be a good hacker? If the answer is yes, then yeah, you do. Look, you don't need to become a master software developer, but understanding some basic Python to automate tasks or some JavaScript to see how websites tick, that's what separates the amateurs from the pros. Okay, foundation is built. Now we're ready for section 3, assembling your digital toolkit. This is where we stop talking theory and start picking up the actual practical tools that will let you apply everything you've learned.
First on the list is Burp Suite. You're going to hear this name a lot if you get into web security. So what is it? It's basically a man-in-the-middle proxy. It sits between your web browser and the website you're visiting, and it lets you catch, inspect, and even change the information going back and forth. You could, for example, try to change the price of something in your shopping cart before the order goes through. It's absolutely essential for finding those kinds of security holes.
Okay, next tool, Wireshark. So if Burp Suite is for looking at web traffic, Wireshark is for seeing, well, everything that's happening on your network. It captures all the little data packets flying back and forth and lets you look inside them. Honestly, it's like putting a stethoscope on your internet connection and listening to the raw conversations happening between computers.
And now we come to what might be the most important part of this whole journey. Section 4, the practice arena. This is the spot where all that theory and all those cool tools, this is where they become actual, real skills.
Now, let me be super clear about this. The #1 rule is that all of this practice must be legal. You can only test your skills in labs that you've built yourself or on websites and platforms that give you explicit written permission to do so. That is the golden rule, no exceptions.
And the good news is there are a ton of amazing legal places to do this. The source points out a few great ones, and they're all a bit different. So, TryHackMe is awesome for beginners. It has these guided learning paths. Hack-to-Box is a step up with more realistic and challenging scenarios. PortSwigger Labs is the place to go for web-specific stuff. And VulnHub is cool because you can download vulnerable machines and practice completely offline.
So, once you've started practicing and building up those skills, you'll naturally start to think, okay, where do I want to take this? And that brings us to Section 5, choosing your quest. And really, when you boil it all down, it comes down to two main paths. You're either on the attacking side or the defending side. And this is where you hear those terms, red team versus blue team. So the red team, they're the ethical hackers, the attackers. Their whole job is to think like a bad guy and find weaknesses. Their entire mindset is, how can I break in? Then you've got the blue team. They're the defenders. They build the defenses, they monitor for threats, they respond when something bad happens. Their mindset is, how do I protect everything? And you need both. They're both absolutely critical to security.
And that brings us to our last section, the never-ending hunt. This is a really important idea to grasp. Cybersecurity isn't a subject you just finish learning one day. Nope, it's a constant, continuous process. You know, there's this quote from the source material that I just love because it sums everything up perfectly. It says, "The real deep web or dark web is page 2 of Google search results." It's such a clever way of saying that the really valuable information, the real secrets, they aren't hiding on some mythical dark corner of the internet. They're just sitting there, waiting to be found by people who are willing to do the hard, persistent research, which is exactly where we started this whole journey.
So there you have it, a real, structured roadmap to take you from total beginner to an actual practitioner. You've got the map, you know the landmarks to look for, and you have the core principles. Really, the only question left to ask is, where are you going to begin your journey?
If you're interested in checking out the complete roadmap, you can download it directly from the link in the description. And if you'd like to connect and learn together, feel free to join our community group as well. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the CyberNetLearners channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss an update.